All right, so just before I hand over to you, my name is Ifa Amponsa, the Communication and Marketing Officer for NREN. I will work under OMO.
Thank you. I'm Priyank Hirani. I work with data.org and I'm the Associate Director for the Capacity Accelerator Network. We are a global platform to build the field of data for social impact, and capacity building and data talent partnerships with universities is a big part of our work. And we're starting with our work in the US, India, and Africa.
Thank you. My name is Mark Urban. I'm Director for International Cooperation and Academic Relations of Red Clara, the Latin American Research and Education Network, based in Montevideo, but covering Latin America.
Marhaba. That's in Arabic. Hello in Arabic. I'm coming from the Arab region. My name is Yusuf Torman, the Managing Director of the Arab States Research and Education Network. We are in Africa and Asia, so I'm happy to be in Africa, my lovely continent. I represent, as I said, the Arab States Research and Education Network. So I'll be presenting, so I will not do more introduction. Thank you.
And hi, everyone. My name is Chris Atherton. I am a Senior Research Engagement Officer from GEO, which is the European Regional Research and Education Network. And we work with NREN, Red Clara, NREN, and many other regional research networks around the world to help connect everyone. So if the guys at the back could help and allow me to share my screen, I will do a quick presentation. Say quick. The format that we're going to have today is a few presentations from the research networks and then open floor up to have a discussion about future plans, next steps, what we'd like to do, but mainly to get your input from the people who are taking part in this, who aren't from the NREN world, to see from a GEO perspective what we could do to help research and help to support research across the world. So it's still disabled. Try it now. Okay. Nope. Still disabled. It's the screen sharing. If you could enable that for me. Thanks. Yeah. You share your screen, slides, and let us proceed. I can share now. Nope. Nope. Oh. Thanks so much. Ah, yes, I can do it now. Perfect. Thanks very much. So for the benefit of people who don't know what a research and education network is, I thought I'd cover that briefly and then go into what we do, well, at Géant, and then offer the floor up to my other colleagues. So why do we have research and education networks? Essentially, it's because the data that gets transported across the networks is unique, and the data that gets generated can't be lost. This is for things like Earth observation data, for radio astronomy, even things like gravitational wave data. This information typically only occurs once, and if we don't record it safely and get it transmitted to the place where it needs to go, we lose it forever. So research networks are designed and built to basically do this job. we're not a typical internet service provider, like a commercial internet service provider. All of us are not-for-profit organizations. Just to give you an example about what it looks like from the traffic perspective, at the top here, we've got a graph of what a typical internet service provider, their traffic patterns look like. So peaks and troughs, and then mainly during the weekdays is when you get the high amounts of traffic, and at night it's quite quiet. Compare that with a research and education network. Data gets sent anytime, any day, anywhere. So the traffic patterns are not predictable. And so you can't really rely on the traditional way of building a network that commercial operators do. We've got to account for this variability. So we optimize everything for research data transfers. And just to give you an example here, we've got connectivity, or we transferred, I think it was 1 terabyte of data from Geneva to Canberra via the, well, it was 2 commercial operators. They could only get around, well, the most was just close to 2 gig a second with a 10 gig link. When we did it using a 10 gig link, we were able to get close to 10 gig a second for the connectivity. So it just goes to show that we build our networks in such a way as to ensure that the data gets to where it needs to go to as efficiently as possible. We don't constrain the data that gets sent across our networks. We over provide capacity in order for the data to get where it needs to go to as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So where we come from, as in Géant, well, if you go back to the beginning of the internet when it started, there was a network that needed to connect CERN with the rest of the world. That was called the European Area Research Network. That eventually morphed its way into Géant, which is what we are now. We connected the European countries together and then connected Europe out to the rest of the world. And we still do that job now. We're a membership association, so there's over 40 different national research and education networks across the whole continent of Europe, not just the EU. And we connect from through our members, Iceland, down to Portugal, all the way across to Azerbaijan, including Ukraine and everywhere else in between. So we're in the process of upgrading our network so that every country can get at least 100 gig of connectivity across the whole of Europe. We're nearly finished with this now, but it was quite a lot of work to get the new network in place. But this will give us extra capacity and allow us to be able to do exascale computing in the future for like the next generation of scientific processing. But as I mentioned before, we don't just connect Europe together, we connect Europe out to the rest of the world. So just to give you an example of this, we worked with Red Clara on a project called the Bella Project, where we delivered the first direct connection between Europe and Latin America, and that was funded by the EC. But we also work with our African partners, ASREN, WACREN, and Ubuntu Net Alliance through a project called Africa Connect 3. Our Africa Connect 3 is there to try and enhance human capacity development in Africa. And I believe Omo is going to talk more about this in a moment. But from a Géant perspective, we are there to try and help with the knowledge that we've got. So some of the work that I do is to try and help Earth observation communities get the data from the likes of ESA and EUMETSAT and help build the case for why an institute needs an NREN connection, and then organizing the technical side of things to be able to get that data delivered to that organization. So we did this quite well in Kenya back in 2019 when we helped RCMRD to connect to the local NREN, and now they're able to receive the EUMETSAT terrestrial service, so the Sentinel 3 data that's near real time, which you can only really get via the research and education networks. And in 2021, 2021, we connected South Africa, SANSPA, and the South African Meteorological Agency to do the same thing. And we're currently working with NREN to help enable the multicast service on the backbone network, so that West and Central African countries are able to now receive, well, not now, but eventually will be able to receive the UMACast terrestrial service as well. So all the NRENs, all the research, regional research networks have been working over the last couple of years to try and collaborate together through the framework of GEO. We started out at COP26, where we stated our ambition to try and collaborate together and to help the research and education community through the infrastructure that we provide. During the Internet Governance Forum in Katowice, we were able to solidify that and signed a declaration, so like an MOU, which covers 12 different points where we want to try and focus on. So we'd like to see a rapid and fluid exchange of data and information for researchers worldwide, and a whole host of other different points, such as capacity development, helping with digital literacy, enhancing the effectiveness of research along the GEO chain, and also looking at the infrastructure that we provide as a group and how that could be best used for Earth observation purposes. So there are a number of different technology areas that GEO is working on at the moment: quantum communications, time and frequency distribution, but the one that I'm more interested in is the smart cables, or science monitoring and reliable telecommunications. This is where we use the cables themselves, the submarine cables, as a sensor and generate data with the cables that we operate. So we've already done this in Madeira, and I'm working with a research group in Norway as well, who are also working on this activity. They've deployed a particular type of technology called a distributed acoustic sensor in Longyearbyen, which is in Svalbard. So if you look at the map on the top left-hand side, that gives you an idea about where Longyearbyen is in the world. The cable is about 200 kilometers long. It runs from Longyearbyen to New Orleans, which you can see on the right-hand side. And with this distributed acoustic sensor, we were able to pick up earthquakes. If you look at the top left again, that star at the very top was an earthquake that was detected on the 22nd of July, 2020. This type of technology is able to detect whales, seismic shifts, disturbances, many things. And when you think that these cables span the world, we can use them to actually start to acquire data from places that's very difficult to get the data from. Some of the things that we've been able to detect, this is a very complicated slide, so I apologize, but if you look at the graph D, where it's got the lines and the numbers on, these are actually storms that were detected from that cable. Number 2 was a storm that was off the coast of Brazil, 13,000 kilometers away. So we're able to detect the strength of the storms. If you can just imagine, like going back to that slide, you can't even see Brazil off the on the map. So it's quite far away, and these low frequency detections enable us to monitor a whole wealth of different Earth observation variables, which at the moment are very difficult to get from existing infrastructure, because it's quite expensive to install dedicated infrastructure for this. So as I mentioned before, there's cables all over the world. there's different technologies that we can use. We're investigating a few of them at the moment, to be able to pick up scientific data from the deep ocean. We're mainly going to be doing this across the Bella cable. So between Brazil and Portugal, Longyearbyen, which I mentioned before, and in the Mediterranean as well. We've also got a dedicated fiber where research groups are now bringing technology that they've developed, like distributed acoustic sensors, to test on a live cable system, well, not a live cable system, but a dark fiber that goes into the ocean, and they're able to detect earthquakes. We proved this when the cable was actually originally installed, which if you come drop me an email afterwards, I'll send you the paper that came out about that and the data that we were able to get from it. But we've got an idea to try and put the different technologies across all of the different sites to build up a broader picture of what's going on our planet. So that was kind of just a brief overview about what I'm up to and what Jean's up to. But now I'll hand it over to, I think it was Omo, or is it Mark? Omo first.
Right. Okay, so we've got the big broad view from Giant and the Giant network. I have some slides. Are you going to put them up? Please. So, so I've just come back from another trip. I just got back last night, so the slides are going to say something else on the first cover page, but the content is what's important. So WACREN, as Chris had mentioned, is the equivalent of the Giant network. So remove publishing and put data, and then we're all fine, open data infrastructures, but the essence is exactly the same. So we had talked about Africa Connect 3, it's still going to be the same topic. We have an initiative called LipSense, which we, as partners in the Africa Connect project, forward. Now, LipSense is the vehicle for driving open access and open science uptake in the region, and for strengthening infrastructures that support this movement. Next. It's a PDF. So, but you should be able to move to the next slide. Maybe I should have shared mine myself. In any case, as I was saying, so Africa Connect 3, I will talk a little bit about it. In the context, I will also describe WACREN because my colleagues will describe their other networks. And then I will talk about LipSense, the open data infrastructures we have, and how I think we can connect the Earth observation data. Okay, so I think Chris had also dealt with a bit of this, but I think what this slide does, it gives you a sense of research and education networks in Africa. So if you look at the, not yet, right? If you look at the green part, those are the connected countries in West and Central Africa, and that's where WACREN covers. There's a list of countries that are the NRENs in the region. ASREN is the part in yellow. ASREN obviously includes the Middle East, but and North Africa. So those are the North African countries in ASREN, Algeria, Egypt, Morocco, and Tunisia. In WACREN, we have those the countries listed. Out of those countries, we have 7 of them actually physically connected. And then the Ubuntu Alliance is the region in brown. So there are 3 research networks in Africa. And the idea is, again, to connect all these countries through high capacity connectivity and data infrastructures like Chris had mentioned. Next. So this is repeating some of the same, in terms of how NRENs are structured, who the beneficiaries are, the kind of services. again, reinforcing that we're not an ISP, it's a dedicated private service for higher education, and the organizational structures, some of them are funded by members, some are public funding, and many of them are hybrid. But in any case, they differ from context to context. So the idea would be that in every country, you'll be leveraging the local dynamics to solve the problem. Can we move on? This situates Africa Connect 3 a little bit more. Talks about NRENs, tells you that 130 NRENs worldwide, 38 of them in Africa. Next slide. I think we've already done enough justice to this. So if anybody here doesn't really understand NRENs, by the time we finish, please ask us. But yes, this is what we do. We provide connectivity, we provide security and the trust and identity. We build communities and provide dedicated support to research communities. In this particular case, we're looking at the apps of communities connected to Earth observation. Go on. And yes, that slide again about the NRENs across the globe. In this time, you have some more names. So you got Red Clara in South America, Latin America. You got Tane in Asia. You got Karen in Central Europe, Internet 2 in North America, our Canary as well in Canada, and ESNet, there are 2 networks in North America. But you can see that this is a global construct, and these are research networks connected to each other. And the idea too is because the whole climate problem is also a global problem, by being able to connect these multidisciplinary research groups, we're able to deal with some of that, the data issue. Next. Now this slide was typically to sort of contextualize the African situation as it's understood today. So some of these data, for instance, the data about the researchers per million people comes from UNESCO. The jury is out on how correct it is. I think it might be worse. The one from the contribution to the world's research output is from Elsevier. That has always been contentious. What it actually expresses is the amount of African research in repositories and structures in the global north. Now, I suppose one of the arguments we're putting forward today and some of the discussions are about leveraging infrastructures in Africa to solve some of these problems. And in the course of, this is Africa Connect 3 to give you an indication of what's happened in the last 10 years of our activity. It gives you a transition from 2010, where you can see the connections out of Africa are very minimal, through the second iteration of the Africa Connect project, which started out in 2015, and where we are today, the current phase in the Africa Connect 3 project. So of the 38 African NRENs, we now have about 22 of those national networks connected to the regional networks, which have these backbone links right now connecting to Europe, but very soon be connecting directly to Latin America. Next. That's the project profile. This particular project started in 2019, is for 37.5 million euros. It is a collaboration between European and African partners, with African partners providing 20% of the funding. Actually, it's directly with INPA, so thank you. And then there's, out of that money, 23 million is being employed for connectivity, equipment, and cloud, and the rest for admin and community building type of activities. So broad objectives, some of which are aligned with the conversations we're having today. Apart from the first output is access to infrastructure, the building of dedicated R&E services and applications. Now that's where we think we can actually engage with the community in terms of tools and services for Earth observation. And then capacity building and overall digital transformation in our sector. So for an idea of the services, again, this will apply in some of the work we hope we will do in future with this community. So we got things for wireless authentication across communities. I already mentioned LipSense for open science. We do have another issue that is that we have found has been some kind of a blocker. Even though we promote open infrastructures, we recognize that, you know, every so often you would have indications for some kind of access, some kind of controlled access. And then the way to do that in a scale, when you want broad participation, is for identity frameworks, you know, and EduID.Africa is one such identity framework that we've just established. And as of last week, it's become a member of EduGain. I don't know if you're familiar with EduGain, but EduGain is an interfederation of identities, global identity across the. So it creates a trust and identity framework for research and education that is global. So with that singular action, we are basically able to bring African researchers into a global construct where they have access to resources that are protected by EduGain and can do the same likewise. Next. So this is LipSense. So to give you an idea, as much as this is a data-centric meeting, there are different layers at which we have to sort of deal with this. So LipSense essentially brings the research networks and library communities together for this, to strengthen open access and open science. And so I'm just going to, because of today's time limitations, I will stick with the outcomes. And these outcomes have been across the different hierarchies. At the campus level, most of the work we are doing is, we have all succeeded in doing, is creating opportunities for the campuses to develop open access, open science policies and build the capacities of both the library and university leadership to manage that process. On the national level, we're doing two things. On one hand, we're doing two things. On one hand, we're running what we call open science roadmaps. Now, these are policy meetings very much like this, where we bring stakeholders together to create opportunities for open in their national policies. And with the NRENs and the library associations consortia, we're actually deploying shared infrastructure for publications and data. Now, the reason this slide is there is to talk about the principles that actually govern our infrastructure overall, overarching principles. So for one, we generally tend to provide infrastructure that satisfies the principles of open scholarly infrastructure. Now, this is a set of principles that deal with community governance, open source software for the tools and services you build, some being able to use certain things like identifiers to make the data or the publication discoverable, and so on and so forth. Now, the second set of principles is the community core. Core is the Confederation of Open Access Repositories. Now, all this data or publications will end up in a repository somewhere, and this framework actually governs how the community relates to this data and these publications. Now, I put the links in there. I hope the slides will be shared. It's much more than that. Please go back to that slide and don't move until I say so. You know, so that sort of refers to how the communities work, and then more importantly, the last set of principles and actions this was developed within the LipSense community, and it actually focuses on how we see African networks interacting with their global counterparts, and some of addressing inequality and supporting equity is very big on our agenda. There is the So that 2%, we believe that 2% is anomalous, and there's the way to actually address that is to provide evidence. So diversity and social justice, at least in the context of the equipment and the infrastructure we deploy, is also high there. What we also need and want is Africa-led and operated open infrastructures. So as much as possible, like Chris mentioned, when we think of UMECAS data, we're thinking about how we provide that locally to our communities, cheaply and effectively in infrastructures that we establish and run. We want to see how we drive at least co-creation of indigenous knowledge. We think that even with the Earth observation space, there's opportunities to learn from how people have staved up situations here or local research that can be sort of utilized. And overall, make these systems interoperable and decentralized, just for the strengths that these provide. Next. I think you can leave this slide. This is a slide that's probably more relevant for that group. What it gives you now in terms of this infrastructure, let's call them data infrastructure in this case. We see a scenario where we're going to collect data, people are going to write articles, people are going to publish, or even social annotation on some of these artifacts, whether data or not. And then in leveraging that into tools and services, we have to have some way to qualify the information. So from a NREN point of view, this is how we see the whole infrastructure working. So this is mostly going to be leveraged in capacity building for the communities that we serve. And I think that's the last slide. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Omo. Next up is going to be Mark. And Mark, if you could mute on your laptop.
Yes, I will mute it.
In Zoom. Yeah, perfect. And yeah, the floor is yours. If you grab the microphone that's just towards your right-hand side. There we go.
Hello, I will share my screen. I hope you can now see my screen. Yes. Don't know how to put it on. Maybe well we can do it that way anyway. It's for me. Oh, that's okay. That's okay. Yeah, well, we can go on, I suppose. Ah, yeah, yes, that's just okay. Okay. So after the presentations of Chris and Omo, I would have little to add in terms of really the impacts that research and education networks have. I would say. But still, I want, of course, to bring up the Latin American point of view, of course, and the Red Clara's part of in the picture, in the global picture, no. So Red Clara has been founded in 2003. And since then, it provides regional interconnection, just a bit like, just like GEO does in Europe, WACREN in Western Africa, ASREN in the Arabic states, and other partners like Internet2 in the United States. And really, the objective is to interconnect the academic community as such. A Red Clara as such is a federation also, just as the other regional research and education networks. gathering the largest academic community in Latin America. And it has been created in partly thanks to some certain projects of that have invested in connectivity infrastructure and digital infrastructure. And the mission and vision and values are very similar to the ones that have already been outlined by my predecessors. So I won't go into in depth in that. So, but basically we are interconnected community for the collaboration of scientific and educational institutions in the region, and which make up a physical network really, and people with a common goal, which is to promote the digitization and education and science in the region. Maybe with a risk of repeating a bit what has already been showed. This is a map also that shows the intention basically of interconnecting research and education networks around the world. But I will stress especially on the triangle that you can see in the Atlantic, connecting on the one side South America with Europe, then Europe to Africa, and then Africa to Latin America. Why do I stress on that triangle? It's because we have just achieved an important milestone in Red Clara's history, actually. On the 1st of June 2021, we inaugurated the link between the first direct link, really, to be named, between South America and Europe. It connects actually Fortaleza in Brazil to Sines in Portugal. And this is in the background, you can see a picture of that inauguration that joined where in the middle of COVID crisis still, the Brazilian science and technology minister, astronaut Marcos Ponte, together with Antonio Costa, the Portuguese prime minister, and also the director of the Ela-Link company that participated to the laying of the cable. So this project Bella that culminated with that cable was a joint project between national research and education networks from Europe and Latin America, basically, and with funding from the Latin American national networks and from the European Commission with a joint financing, quite complex construct actually, but from different DG funds. It was successfully concluded finally, and really we can say that Bella is a nice achievement, which is a vital line that connects really the European and Latin American ecosystems, digital ecosystems. So it represents a space for cooperation within the framework of the EU-LAC Digital Alliance that is currently in talks. So this is very important now. This is, let's say, one of the first milestones for what is to come. This is really an infrastructure that promotes cooperation in the framework of actions linked to climate change, among other things. No, but climate change is really one of the main topics through the Copernicus program and a space for the training of specialists in the use of data, certain aspects that my predecessors already mentioned, and I think this connection will play a certain role in these aspects. That's what we have achieved right now. You can see that there's still a part missing, and that's what we intend to to close with the next phase of the Bella project. We are hoping to close the Latin American backbone through Peru. That will be one of the main objectives of the second phase of the Bella project. Other objectives will be to integrate Central American members, and also the perspective of connecting the Caribbean. So we have beyond the second phase of Bella, and that's really what Bella also allows to project, is really a further incentive to interconnect other parts of the world. There is a big project being, let's say, set up to connect South America to Australia, and from there to Asia. So really, that would allow the connection to be complete. And that would show that what Omo showed us, the real dimension that we want to achieve, which is a complete scientific interconnection. That's really one of the objectives of all that what we are looking for. Another part of that in that is the perspective to connect Chile to Antarctica, which is really the shortest way to connect the wide continent. It's around 1,000 kilometers, a bit less. Of course, there are other aspects connected to that that Chris already mentioned in terms of difficulties, but definitely this is one of the perspectives that we want to bring about. So these are an outline of some of the academic and technical developments that Red Clara is trying to promote, the support to the development and strength of the national research and education networks. It's a big part of our work, but participation in work groups, in education, in climate change, in telemedicine, in blockchain, also work on blockchain, which is an important topic connected to cybersecurity, of course. And then the different digital services that my predecessors already mentioned. So what about the scope of collaboration? Now we are talking about the Katowice Declaration. Chris already outlined the 12 points. I won't mention it again, of course, but this is really what brought us here. We want to discuss with all what we showed here about what research and education networks are for, how to bring about a more rapid and fluid exchange of data, information, and knowledge among researchers worldwide. This is really one of the main objectives within open access policies and maintaining and upgrading of infrastructure and technology. I'm stressing on that point because it's important to take into consideration that I think that the research and education networks, they constitute really, we have to see them as a public good. It is not only a service provided to different research communities. It's really a public good that is available for the research community and for the education community. So, and this is something that we have to maintain on the one side, and we have to get known by, because I mean, the universe that we are embarking is very large, and many stakeholders still don't know us. They don't know that this infrastructure is available to them. And this is really something that we have to also to articulate in a way, you know. And that's why also we want to enter into technical and human capacity development and knowledge management topics. No? That's also one side of what we want to. So that's why we kind of we're designing a certain strategy in that way. So to advocate for the use and dissemination of open access knowledge in innovation, science, and technology. From there, building international, regional, local engagement for capacity development, and then to promote the development of specific products in that context. I won't read all the what we can conclude on what researchers really need. I think we have already talked about that. We can discuss it further, but really the important thing is that we want that researchers, they can use collaborative development environments and platforms that allow the traceable, federated and safe use, assessment and contribution of open resources that will allow the construction and dissemination of knowledge by the different communities. Some of the points that are important in the context of the scientific collaboration in the region. One of the challenges to reduce the digital divide. There's, of course, there are different aspects there connected to that. It's not the only continent that is in that case, of course, but it's essential. Funding is also always a challenge, of course, in that context. We have had, and we were going to have a lot of support from the European Commission and from other, hopefully from other stakeholders that we are gathering very soon in Montevideo between 14th and 18th of November. We are trying to gather important stakeholders of the digital ecosystem and of the digital alliance between Europe and Latin America in particular, but also inside Latin America. And so we are hoping to promote, to be able to promote the second phase of BELA in order to reach really a momentum in the construction of the network. With these objectives, of course, in mind, I mean, to reach really these objectives that will allow researchers to use the infrastructure for their purpose within the FAIR principles, the open science principles, etc. I think I'm over my time, but these are different possible. This is a possible roadmap for us. I will leave it to you, of course, to read it further on. And we can discuss it, of course. And I will hand over to Yusuf now, finally. And thank you for your patience.
Thank you very much. Can you just unshare your screen? Can you please allow me to share my screen?
Mark, I think you have the ability to do that as well. You're co-host.
Maybe you need to.
So.
Okay, hello everyone again. So that I can be faster now. Hello again. My name is Yusuf Torman, the Managing Director of the Arab States Research and Education Network. I'm happy to be with you, and I will be presenting. Actually, I mentioned also Afrigeo because it's part of our interest and our collaboration. So I mentioned both because both are happening at the same time. Before that, takes time to show this. Okay. Now, I'm in agreement, and maybe I need to also to comment that NRENs are no longer only about infrastructure. They are more than this. They are, I count them science or enabler or SDGs or so on. So for this slide, it's who's very important, who's crucial. Now we as NREN, we are a promoter for science cooperation, and we consider it as crucial for development like SDGs, climate action, and so on. And this cannot work, science cooperation cannot work without good infrastructure. And this good infrastructure is always managed and provided as a service through research and education network. So I believe the research and education networks are the crucial for the crucial. I think research and education network has been expressed, so I don't want to go into this. And this one also, I think you are familiar with this now. It has been, and this one is where our engines are, and this is about Giant. It's at the heart of the network, and everybody knows that, and we agreed on that. So that's ASREN. ASREN has been presented and established in 2010, and under the umbrella of League of Arab States. So we are now 12 years old. We work for the Arab region to establish research and education infrastructure together with services and enabling science cooperation and so on. So this is, I know why it's going very slow. Our main objectives are all around establishing network at the national level, supporting development of NRENs at the national level and at the regional level, together with services and facilitating cooperation. As usual, we are similar to any NREN regional network around the world. Our main areas of intervention dedicate the research and education networks, connectivity, research and education services, science cooperation, community engagement, and scientific computing and internet access, governance, and security. I apologize, I don't know what's going on. So this is our region. Mainly we call it the Arab region. We split into two continents, Asia. So you see this, many of the countries are connected. Many of them have, some of them have Rome and Dogen in place. But the funny part of the story is that we are all connected as individual NRENs to Europe or to Amsterdam or to London. So this is one of our main challenges, that we are unable to establish pan-Arab exchange points within the Arab region. That's, I think, a challenge that we are taking ahead together with. We started cooperation with the European Commission starting in 2005 with Human Connect 1, 2, and now it's 3. Although it's over, but we are discussing with the European Commission to go for further connectivity. But the good thing that we are now good partners with Africa Connect 3, which has been presented, I think, very thoroughly, and so I will go over it very quickly. It's NRENs in Africa, you know them. Africa Connect 3 and activities. I think I believe that you are familiar with everything, but I will give a special focus on engagement with user communities. That's why we are here now. Through Africa Connect 3, we have been in touch with various groups or research and education communities, GEO, GMS and Africa, African Radio Astronomy Partnership, Digital Earth Africa, African Strategy for Fundamental and Applied Physics, African Light Source Community, and also we are identifying some climate action-based communities. We are also thinking beyond Africa Connect 3, how we can cooperate with DG Intra and other DGs to support our communities further. Now, this is my first slide, actually. I used to invite NREN to look around what is going on in terms of global observation, global trends, priorities around the world, SDGs, climate access, earth observation, health, internet governance, and all of these are of relevance to NRENs. It's not necessarily that they can do everything in these, but they can be part of it. Like if you look at the main observation, United Nations SDGs, science cooperation and science diplomacy, open science, open access, and open data, science communities and communities of practice, scientific computing, science cooperation platforms like clouds and so on, internet access, governance. NRENs can be contribute to any of these, not necessarily to do, as I said, to do everything, but they can be host some services, they can be a convener of an activity, they can be operator of some kind of service related to some of these efforts that needs. They can be a secretariat, they can be involved. The reason I'm sending this invite, because when we work with science communities, when we work with politicians, we need to speak the science language, not the technical language and the infrastructure language that they do not understand. So we can go together with some, let's say, climate action communities to the ministry and say, we need this service and we need this infrastructure to support these activities. I think that it will be accepted more than we speak, just we need network, 100 gigabit per second or whatever. This is not understandable by the governments. However, so this is my call, ASRIN's call for NREN to get more engaged and have a new role. This will bring them more visibility and maybe more effort, but more money also to support their plans and so on. Well, this is part of what we are trying to do. We are trying to establish the pan-Arab open science cloud, following the models that we have been part of African Open Science Platform, European Open Science Cloud, to which we are observer now, official observer, and we have been part of the General Assembly last May, and we are contributing through our people to many of the task force with the EOSC, the same for NI4OS, which is in East Europe, and African Open Science Platform. We have been part, at least when it was related to infrastructure. So we are taking these activities to promote Arab Open Science Cloud to our policymakers and so on. And therefore, we have signed. I hope that's coming slide. Yeah, maybe I'm missing one slide. Also, we are we are coordinating with Latin America with another activities. We are deploying their La Francia, which is one of the most advanced regional harvester to connect and harvest open data repositories in our region. We have signed this agreement recently, and we are trying to start the deployment of this activity. For our cloud planning, we have our own cloud, which is established, and our own private cloud, but also we are exploring extending this cloud beyond the private cloud, and we are discussing with the various cloud providers, and also through OCRE, which is the European procurement system for clouds. We are, as I said, we are promoting science cooperation as means for development, and also as part of our activities, at least as Regional Research and Education Network. And we have been the convener for the Arab Science Cooperation Summit during the United Nations General Assembly 77th. It was virtual this year, and we had a successful event. And for Africa Connect 3, we also ASRIN has conducted the Africa Connect 3 as a panel discussion on digital infrastructure to enable science cooperation in Africa. That was also virtual during the United Nations Science Summit through United General Assembly 77, and Angelica participated in this session also. I invite all of us to be ready for the next summit. It's United Nations General Assembly 78. During that summit, there will be the main, they call it Summit of the Future. It's the one of the planning platforms that our United Nations does. So there will be a huge science summit during that year, and its main themes are about sustainability, solidarity, and science. So you see, science is the language that the globe speaks science, and science comes under. You can't speak when you say science. It requires infrastructure, it requires collaboration, it requires platforms, cloud, and so on. But the language now of the world is science. Catalyst declaration, I think, has been mentioned, so I will not go this partnership and this relationship, and these are the declarations that I think have been presented by Chris, so I will not go through them. But I like this slide, which I stole from Red Clara again. It's the science triangle. So we are trying to establish a science triangle between the 3 continents, and we are proud that Catalyst declaration is a starting point. From now on, I think at ASEAN level, we are working for the future. We are discussing with the several DGs in Europe and on having long-term connectivity. So the discussions for under what is so-called Medusa project, we are thinking of 25 years IRU at 200 gigabit per second. This is together with DG INPA, DG NEAR, European Investment Bank, Union for Mediterranean, Afrix, ASEAN, and Joint. We hope it will go through, and you will hear the announcement, inshallah, soon. This demonstrates what we have been doing and cooperating. I'd like to thank our colleagues at EUMETSAT for inviting us to take part in 15th EUMETSAT, and also for unicasting Africa. Maybe they are not well ordered. You are now casting in Africa, and AfriConnect was there on all meetings. And so we are engaged with all user communities at the same point. Before leaving, I invite you to the youth track. That is tomorrow. That's for tomorrow. I invite you to be there. It's all of us will be there speaking about Road to GEO Post 2025. So we'll be there, and I hope you all can join us. And also, I don't know how the slides move. What is it? Yeah, so it's our annual conference. You are invited all. It will be in Cairo, 13th to 15th of December. Hope you all can join us. And sorry for taking a long time. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. So we're now coming to part of the session where it's going to be a bit of well, we don't know how this is going to go. So what we were going to do is, now that you've kind of got a better idea about what NRENs are and what we do, and what type of services we provide at the moment, as a GEO community that's assembled here, what directions would you like us to go in? And I know that's a very broad question, but in terms of the support that we could offer to scientific research, specifically for Earth observation communities, are there any areas that you can see that we've missed or gaps? Or even just general comments. And this is not just to the people in the room, but also to those who are joining us online as well. Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay, I'll introduce myself again. My name's Owen Iyoha. I work for EcoConnect Research and Education Initiative in Nigeria. It's NREN service provider, and I lead the operations in the organization. this is actually the first time I've attended GEO Week. So I've learned quite a few things today, and also mixing with people who work within that community. So I see lots of opportunities where there's a lot of synergy between what the EOGIS community is trying to achieve in terms of capacity building, leveraging networks, etc. But I've also spoken to a few vendors while I've been here, and it seems that a lot of the data that they collect, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of it seems to be proprietary or kept for commercial purposes. So considering NREN and RN practitioners, we want to be able to open up data, make data available. I'm just wondering how the Katowice Declaration probably deals with the issues that many of the GIS solution providers are kind of trying to make the data they have sort of for profit or commercial. I'm just wondering if there's any comments on that.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Nice to see you again after 3 years. Okay, my name is Vincent Gabalio. I'm working for EUMETSAT, and I would like to suggest a few things, maybe mainly on our experience with Africa. And thanks, Youssef, for highlighting the engagements that you had this year also with the user community in Africa, mainly the Met services, but all people interested in weather and climate information, which we provide free of charge, actually, and openly as the Copernicus in Europe. So there is quite a lot of free of charge EO data available around. And indeed, sometimes data access is one of the main barriers. And then it's the capacity to use the data. That's the second one. So, but my suggestions with respect to the experience that we have had so far, obviously, one of the issues sometimes is the last mile. Some institutions, how they can get connected. So sometimes it's a level of investments that they cannot necessarily afford. So that's obviously one of the issue, even if the network is there in the country or even in the city. Second, sometimes is the, we have seen that in some countries it worked very well, like Kenya, South Africa, the people were quite proactive in engaging or knowing already NREN. In some other countries, they need a bit more to be accompanied or to have us there, I will call it business case for an institution like a Met service, or even to engage with the NREN. There is sometimes a communication gap between the NREN provider and some users, which they cannot easily fill by themselves with the information we provide them. So maybe sometimes an involvement directly at national level to help this. I know that there is a lot of effort, it's not easy, but that would be one of the suggestions based on the experience we have seen so far.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I didn't get the name, so I just want to sort of have the name so that I can come back to you.
Vincent.
Vincent. Yes. Right, okay, so I'm really pleased that you sort of situated the problem in that manner, because yes, we have seen the similar trends. And I suppose this is where I ask my colleague here who I brought, this is Garnet. So you're right, yes, those there are communication gaps. But I think in the Ghana case, since we started to talk about this has been like 3 months now, we are sort of developing a template which we will work with the NRENs to close those gaps. So maybe I will let Lucas describe a little bit more of this, about what he's been doing in Ghana since we decided that if the GEO week is going to hold in Ghana, we had to sort of, speak up a little bit.
Okay, so thank you very much. Look, you are right. Last mile connectivity is an issue, and not just for GeoMet and geological survey, outfits. It's indeed a difficulty for all of our members that we target: research hospitals, museums, schools, universities, etc. Now, with GMET, what we did was, first of all, they didn't know about us, as you said. there's an information gap. There's not enough awareness of the existence and objectives of NREN. So we had to reach out to them and to say, look, how is your connectivity like? At the moment, what they do, they actually buy connectivity from commercial service providers. You can imagine GMET in Ghana, they have just 10 meg into their operation. They have about 25 outstations for transmission of data to the center every hour. And what they do is they buy data bundles and stick them in devices that try to transmit the data. Now, when their subscription runs out, there's no data transmission. Okay, everything goes down. And so we contacted them and said, look, this is the area in which we operate. We believe that if we're able to provide you with the infrastructure, with the wealth of data that you have, which a lot of other organizations depend on, like universities, the universities ask them for information almost on a weekly basis. Now, if we fashioned out an arrangement such that you're able to get these universities to subscribe to get the information from you, because it costs you money to generate all of that, then is there a way that we can come to the level where if we assisted you to have the connectivity initially, because you don't have the money now, we try and get some connectivity through, we help you to store and render this information in such a way that is accessible, then you would get contribution from all those who depend on that information, so we can move forward together. So what we've done is, our preferred mode of connection last mile is dark fiber. If we are not able to get that, we look for just that fiber with no restrictions on it. What we have been able to achieve now is to provide air fiber connectivity using radio connections, so that this transmission is done. They are able to have their data come through quickly. And with WACREN, we understand that we are going to be able to help them to receive data from Eumelsat and Copernicus data via terrestrial links. That's through our links. When we do that, we also have in place a project for repository capture of information. We want to include them in there, put access layer on it, and make a self-service available to all those who need the data from GMET services. We also do have our own mobile data bundle, which we've configured through access point names using our connection, where there's no expiry of data, which means that we're now going to be able to enable them to do their transmissions. And this will only be for areas where we cannot establish fiber connections, because some of the locations are remote and you do not have national infrastructure there. So this way we are able to help GMET to improve connectivity, improve data management, because they do not have enough storage. And once we do that, there's a project we're working on now, that's the weather information dissemination system, which would then showcase and make their information easily available to all those who need it. So this is basically how we are approaching it. We cannot wait until they have enough resources to move forward. The trick is show the value, okay? If you demonstrate the value, then you are able to attract support. So that's what we are trying to do, to collaborate with GMET to make available and to showcase the value that they can deliver to the community, and in so doing, be able to attract support from the wider community and from government and from funding agencies. That's the way we are approaching it at the moment. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I was just going to say, UMETcast, the terrestrial service, that's the first data we're passing through that link, So that's why I wanted your name. So I'll come back for the rest of the data that we're going to pass through the same link. So the idea here, at least in the Wakran region, because this is the first sort of use case that we've had, we want to be able, like Lucas has described, we want to be able to model that, into a simple enough, here's the value for the NREN that the NREN brings to this whole, F observation data. And this is how we have done it in Ghana, leveraging the connections to the meteorological services and the survey agency. So it's a small model. So last mile, UMETCAS data, possibly Copernicus, links, and then connect the universities to that and see what happens there and see how we replicate that from country to country.
No, I think that's really important as well, because we've done this with Ubuntu Net Alliance in Kenya and South Africa, but we need a use case in Western Central Africa to actually use that to grow out the connectivity to other countries in Western Central Africa, so that WACREN has a use case and saying, we've done this with GMET, for example, and Ghana have directly benefited from this connectivity by it being established. And having that use case, I think, for you guys is so important. But yeah.
Yes, thank you. To add to what has been said, and on which I can only agree to everything that was said, but answering, coming back to your question, Vincent, and also I think it's related to the first question, is about the value effectively of the research and education networks. It's fundamental to bring about the value, to show the value in order to get adherence and appropriation from the stakeholders that are involved into the investment because it's, as I mentioned, the real value is it is a public good for science and education. We tend to always to forget that. I mean, the stakeholders tend to forget that, and especially if we scale down from the global dimension to the local dimension. And that's really one of the challenges that we've had since the beginning of the research and education networks, I think. This is a very, very important. The last mile dimension is effectively important. And that's one struggle that all the national research and education networks have to deal with on a daily basis. And on all the continents, even in Europe, where maybe the investment part is better secured than in other parts, but still, the examples that you mentioned are very relevant, and it's a case-to-case struggle, of course, and but we really have always to take on the value dimension, the global value dimension of all that. It can't be lost, this view, otherwise effectively the appropriation and the engagement gets lost. That's for sure. So it is fundamental to have the message, to get the message through. And we have plenty of examples to get solutions onto the last mile connection. The innovation from our community, I think it's very rich. There are a rich amount of examples to bring about the solutions. You mentioned some on our side. RNP, the Brazilian network, is very, let's say, proactive in that field, in finding innovative solutions together with the private sector. It's nothing conflictive, really. If you think about it, it has to go hand in hand also with all the stakeholders that are taking part to the digital infrastructure. RNP finds solutions for very remote users. For instance, they are constructing a subfluvial connection through the Amazon to get to very remote communities that otherwise would rely only on very expensive satellite connection. And they get cable, fiber cable. It's fantastic. It's completely, but it's feasible through innovative, of course, innovative thinking. And that's where I think this community is very rich about for that. No, it has a spirit of really, and that's also because of the value of the global dimension of the whole thing, no, of the whole network. So that's what I wanted to say, and also, but at the same time, answering partly probably to the first question. Thank you.
And thank you. Actually, you have a problem with the last. I have a problem with the first mile. because when you go, I can just list maybe one or two examples. We had an exchange point in one country, in one of our Arab countries, and the cost for taking it from mainland New York to that country, to that exchange point, let's say 1 million euros, for example. And the cost for connecting, getting into the country for maybe 100 meters of optical fiber, it's the same amount that for getting from mainland to Fujairah, let's say. To be frank, getting from mainland to Fujairah is the same price as if you're going from Fujairah to the network, the network with the operator in that country. So we have many challenges that we are struggling, all of us we are trying. Some countries have some maybe good regulations, like Jordan, like Morocco, to some extent Tunisia. But if you look at Egypt, if you look at Emirates and others, it's really hard. That's the reason that when I showed you it's funny that we have to go individual countries where we are unable to have, let's say, a neutral or some kind of space, let's say free zone, or free to have some kind of exchange point that we can bring everything together within our region. It's really complicated. So again, last mile and first mile is, but we are solving this at the per country, not per region. And thank you.
So I just wanted to add one final point, because I've got the mic now, and then I think we'll have to draw it to a close, unfortunately, because we've run out of time. But what I wanted to say is that NRENs are slightly evolving from where we were a few years ago. We're now not just doing data connectivity, as in the actual fibers in the ground. We still do that, but as my colleague here mentioned before, providing data infrastructure, compute infrastructure, we call it a full stack NREN. So you're providing not just connectivity, but all of the support and services that go to help the research and education communities in a particular country. That's the direction that we're now heading in. So as you asked before, like, what can NRENs do to try and support that, helping those research communities access the data in an open source kind of way? I think over time, we're now starting to evolve into a position as a community, as a research and education community, that the NRENs will be able to offer the storage, the processing, and the connectivity to the likes of open source data sets that are offered by EUMETSAT, ESA, Copernicus, for example, to combine them all together in a local place where they can access it from the local infrastructure. But this takes time, and we're not there yet. But that's kind of the direction of travel that we're, as a community, we're going in at the moment. The chat, we've not had any questions on the chat. Just Arlene congratulating Mark and Red Clara for the connectivity to Latin America, which is I agree. It's a fantastic achievement, major milestone. Yeah, sadly, we've run out of time.
In conclusion, because there are going to be regional specificities, in the way this all evolves, in the connection. And then I was just going to piggyback on Chris's last remarks on how NRENs are evolving. This is an opinion, so don't hold me to it. But I think African NRENs will have to evolve slightly differently. And the reason being is that, and which is why the strategic outlook of GEO in the next 5 years is important to actually consider this. The reason being is that, increasingly African governments are looking at all kinds of digital programs, and now they're starting to, especially after COVID, connect the dots with the different programs that are there and starting to see that there are areas of synergy and that they can leverage youth, in many ways. That's on one hand. On the other hand, we have an emerging telecoms landscape in Africa. So it's the same thing with data centers. So that is also in a flux. Now, the way we would solve the problems would be to leverage those interests in the different stakeholders. So it might mean that, certain models that are prevalent maybe in Latin America or in Europe would need to be adjusted for our realities. It might also mean that, so you saw the Ghanaian example. So we're having to run a pilot, first of all, with the resources we have to bring to, like almost a demonstrator to demonstrate the value to the principal stakeholders. And now we're also aware of the resource constraints. So the models, like he said, might just be, as much as we understand it's a public good and should be a public good, there are also the realities of our environment. So I personally see a more entrepreneurial sort of agenda with solving this problem in Africa, because we need to not just create the research value for the researchers, all right, but we also have to create the values for these nascent industries. Thank you.
Well said. So yeah, I'd just like to say thank you very much, everyone, for coming today, this afternoon even, and for bearing with us while we overran. Thank you to all of our guests online. And with that, I'd like to wish you all a pleasant evening. Take care. Oh, we've got a group photo.